Welcome. Welcome to everybody who's joined us. And I understand we've got a number of continents represented with us today. Thank you for joining us on such an important topic around talent, and not only talent for South Africa, but talent on a global basis where South Africa can be a solution. I'm Sharon Constanson. I'm chairman of the South African Chamber of Commerce, and it's wonderful to have all of you sharing the next hour with us, including my esteemed panel. So today we have an event that is being run by our Cape chapter. This is about talent. It's about people who have experience in this area, and it comes led by Renee Stegman, who is the leader of our Cape chapter. So we thank them for the energies with her and her team at bringing together this event, and also the energy that we are building in the Cape region to develop membership in that space for the South African Chamber, which is based in the UK. We have chapters now in about 5 or 6 different areas, no, 7, 8 odd areas now. So we're growing in terms of our chapters, and equally the Chamber is growing globally in the formation of the Council of Global South African Chambers. If you're interested in the global issue, we are running around the world for charity on the London Marathon. So please watch the space. We've got some interesting things coming ahead. But to the point of today, this is why you're here to join us. On the image that in front of you, you see 4, but you will find out we are 5. So let me go through our panelists and welcome them. Renee Stegman, Cape chapter of the South African Chamber, but she equally has her own business, which is focusing this area of talent management and inbound talent into South Africa, and I think to a degree outbound, but she seems to answer all my questions when it comes to inbound and outbound issues. We have with us Dr. Imtiaz Suleiman, who is the founder of Gift of the Givers Foundation, probably one of the most well-known men through the COVID, who really made a difference on the ground as a charity. And he's known for having given up his life, being encouraged to, and has spent a lot of time doing good by those who really, really need it, seen as being a very honest, trustworthy gentleman who gets things done. Andrew Donaldson, who has got an esteemed career in working in public sector, but very much in very specific areas of industry or business where the government has operated, and is currently a senior research associate of the South African Labour and Development Research Unit, School of Economics at the University of Cape Town. Imran Sumra, who is currently on sabbatical, lucky gentleman, a senior executive for 30 years, working in the C-suite of many regulated industries, broadcast media, healthcare, and fishing. And then we have Leanne. Leanne is a bundle of fun, joy, energy, and inspiration, leading and chief marketing and client officer for YES, which is the education process for youth, getting the youth educated and into genuine jobs. So actually the full supply chain of solving the solution of educating an element of our population. And she has got some fairly high statistical numbers of how many people have come through this effort, which is a brainchild of Ramaphosa, if I'm correct. So I've spoken long enough. Thank you very much for listening. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Renee, who's going to set the scene around the situation on the talent desert that exists globally at the moment. And I think for me personally, the big issue I want to see solved globally through, and has to come through talent and talent education and movement, is can we get the level of service in the world back to where it was before COVID? So I look forward to seeing how all of you are going to achieve that through the solutions you're going to offer. At this point, I'm going to take down the slide and I'm going to leave it for all of you to now enjoy. And thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you so much. Really good to be here, and welcome everybody in the audience and to our wonderful panelists. So like any crisis, we really need to put our heads together to find ways to find sustainable solutions to resolve them. So I'm going to share a link on the chat. I'm going to rely on Stuart in the background to share that with everybody. And really it's about how radical collaboration can resolve problems. And the example I have is the human-animal conflict in Rwanda. So the awful poaching of the gorillas, which was actually resolved through the powerful and thoughtful collaboration between civil society, government, and the private sector, and has led to, since 2006, no more poaching in Rwanda. So that is a hell of an achievement through really thoughtful and radical collaboration. So we have a crisis in South Africa. The unemployment rate is one of the highest in the world, which also leaves our crime stats to be very high as well. So we can't shy away from those problems, and it is really time to get radical and find solutions that are scalable. We're not necessarily here today to resolve or say that any of us have the answers, but what we want to discuss are the pain points and the issues, and see if there are roadways we can create to radically collaborate together and to change the South African landscape. Clem Santa recently said, we're a ticking time bomb. Are we seeing what's coming? So on that note, I'd like to welcome first Andrew Donaldson.
Hello, Renee.
Hi, Andrew. Welcome. So Andrew, sort of a morbid opening, I guess, in some ways, but hopefully today, just with our discussions, we can kind of have a look at what those pain points are and really look at some sort of futuristic optimism into the future. So really, I want to ask, what is the importance of the schoolwork transition and getting into that job market? I mean, as we know, most employers want experience, but the school leavers don't have experience. So that's a real challenge. And then also that first job really plays such an important role in laying that groundwork for training and experience for those individuals. So do we have a relevant educational structure in place to provide this in the South African context?
Renee, when business people talk about South Africa's economic prospects, fixing the education system is the thing that comes to mind very quickly. But of course, the problem with that is that it's a long-term project. We inherited 25 years ago a very fragmented education system. There are lots of things that need to be addressed. You can't replace the teaching force in a short time. And the good news is that in the last decade, we have seen improvements in educational outcomes. But economic growth has a relationship with education that really can only be measured over the long term. And what I also like to emphasize is that it's a two-way thing. Yes, the education system provides people with a basic foundational knowledge and competences that contribute to productivity over time, but work experience and rising incomes in households provide the feedback loop into opportunities, learning in the family and in the household and in the workplace that in turn contributes to improving education. Educational outcomes are not just about what government education departments do. They're also about what households and families bring to the learning process, and they're about business relationships with households and communities and what they can contribute to learning. So we've learned a huge amount in the last decade or so about the school to work transition through initiatives like the Yes Foundation that Leanne will talk about, like the Harambee Project, which is a very large partnership between government and private sector businesses that's about finding young people who leave school with a weak education background but have a mixed range of competences and interests, need to be helped in learning what they can do and what kinds of businesses and work opportunities work for them, and then getting the kind of work readiness training opportunities that assist in that transition. Just leaving school leavers to find work doesn't work as a strategy. You need interventions, and businesses need to be part of that project and part of that initiative. So we've learned a lot about what to do. It's about learning about work readiness. It's about a mix of vocational skills, but it's also about finding the right people, working with the organizations, community-based organizations, the placement agencies, the employment services that help put people in the right work opportunity, and often a range of work opportunities for the first few years before settling into something. But if that doesn't happen in the first few years after leaving school, young people really get left behind. And that is what we're experiencing now with rising unemployment. A high proportion of young people getting left behind, and all kinds of social stresses, homelessness, drug abuse, etc., that result from that. So we have this huge challenge to get more young people into work opportunities, and that's what we're talking about today. Businesses have got a central role to play in that. I'm going to talk a bit later, I think, a bit about that.
Absolutely. In fact, that's my next question was, there's a gap between, I guess, the technical and vocational education. So how do we think we could overcome some of those gaps? Are there systems in place already, or is this something we need to start working towards?
I really just want to make one point on that, and that is that especially for foreign businesses coming into South Africa, thinking about what they do, how they work in their local business environment, it's important to understand that our vocational education and training colleges, the sort of further education opportunities other than universities, are well developed in our cities, but they are national institutions. They're nationally funded and organized. And the education and training authorities, what we call our SETAs, Sector Education and Training Authorities, which are the interface between businesses and training institutions, both for work readiness and for in-service work, are also nationally coordinated, sectorally coordinated. Now, that doesn't always work for the local business, because it's the local college that you need to work with, not some office in Pretoria or Johannesburg. And so I think that it's important to actually put special efforts into creating local collaboration between the colleges, local education departments, which are provincially run, but especially the colleges, both in the public and the private sector. We have good public colleges in our cities. We also have a wide range of privately funded, well-organized training organizations, but their collaboration with business doesn't happen automatically. And I think that's a real challenge and an opportunity for the chambers and for business groupings to build stronger relationships with the colleges and explore what you can assist colleges do, get their curricula up to date and relevant to your needs, what you can co-fund that might work for you. There are tax advantages in some of these kinds of collaboration. If you get that right, we can talk about the practicalities. But that challenge of getting better collaboration between businesses and colleges, especially in the cities, is really central to improving growth opportunities and work opportunities for young people over time.
And actually, Andrew, you sort of mentioned the foreign sort of companies aspect. And what I've noticed in my sector is a couple of companies who are coming in because globally there is a huge shortage of global talent in Europe. So they're coming to places like South Africa to get fairly skilled workers, but setting up offices here. And it would be interesting to put some sort of model together where, through that a mechanism, they could almost fund, others to go through college systems so that we leave a surplus of sort of educated talent in the country. But it is an interesting discussion. And as you said, it's going to require much more conversation and collaboration to make those sorts of things happen. Thank you, Andrew. For now, I'm going to move on to Leanne.
Hi, Renee.
Hi, Leanne. Welcome. I was quoted a stat recently, which was quite frightening. It's 29.3% dropout rate from school, which means our youth, a third of our youth do not finish high school, which is quite frightening. And that must leave a huge sense of hopelessness, to access the job market at all. In what you do, how do you think youth could find a sense of purpose and gainful employment? And also, how do you think this mindset we could change to give them a sense of hope?
Thanks, Renee. And I think actually Andrew has also really set the stage quite well. It's exactly to your point that if we look at some of the latest unemployment stats in South Africa, while there has been an improvement, which is obviously always worth acknowledging, we still face the reality where 2 in 3 young people in South Africa under the age of 34 are jobless. And I think Andrew also spoke to this trap that young people find themselves in, where I can't get a job without experience, and I can't get experience without a job. And to exacerbate that, we have a skills demand mismatch. So to your point, we are creating jobs in the first economy in sectors like finance, consulting, professional services, digital, but our youth are coming out of the schooling system often without even a matric, to your point earlier. So the reason YES exists is, from a long-term point of view, as Andrew mentioned, we need some major structural reforms in South Africa. We need an energy system that works. We need investment. We need an investment in our education system, and a number of other interventions. But YES is a way to really incentivize business to come in and hire youth, either within their own organizations or through host partners, in order to make them more employable. We've just seen statistics saying that if you get work experience, you're 7 times more likely to transition into employment. So that is why we are in existence. So we have a collaboration with government where we have a piece of legislation that helps businesses to improve it's a South African BEE scorecard. So basically it's an indicator to the market that you are an inclusive business and it's a competitive advantage. So businesses who join the program, sponsor youth jobs, 12-month work opportunities, are able to then move on their scorecard. And then beyond just BEE, we're really working with, and particularly a lot of international companies now who are focused on their sustainable development goals, environmental, social, and governance strategies, to place youth in work opportunities that are both high impact and easier to break into. So for example, you don't need to have a degree to work as an HIV counselor in a community clinic, or as a teacher's assistant, or in conservation. And we're also using, really trying to invest in future-facing jobs at the moment to make these youth as employable after the program as possible. So for example, business process outsourcing, digital, etc. So hope that you didn't lose me there, but really trying to get these youth into opportunities in communities that provide a sense of dignity, have huge impact within the communities. So we've seen queuing times in clinics reduced, access to HIV care through these youth being placed in these work opportunities through the private sector. And I think to be stuck in this place of hopelessness and despair, we have seen the difference it makes to young people when they are given this opportunity, and to business as well. Often it means that youth are provided opportunities that businesses would otherwise be hesitant to offer to young people because it may be risky to place them in their organization. But through the program, they're able to test these young people and find the real gems. And it's been extremely energizing and positive to see the outcomes. And I mean, I think for young people, what my advice is to get any experience you can. It doesn't have to be paid experience. You can volunteer at your church, just get experience and references on your CV get onto LinkedIn. One of the things that we've done from a collaboration point of view is obviously, as I mentioned, we're collaborating with all of these host partners in community to create communities to create opportunities for young people in high impact sectors. In addition to that, we have collaborated with Harambee and SA Youth Mobi through Presidency and Harambee. And this is one platform that youth can go onto and register for learning and earning opportunities. And that includes YES, but other opportunities as well. So before, we all had our own databases. So there was a YES database, there was a national database. And now we've said, let's make it as easy as possible for young job seekers to actually go and look for jobs. And it's zero rated because obviously access to internet is a major barrier for South Africans. So really trying to reduce the barriers to entry for young people and working with other organizations within the youth development ecosystem, as well as obviously our private sector clients who come on and create these opportunities for young people.
Amazing. And I guess on the sort of link to that is, I think about the entrepreneurial spirit of Africans. I mean, I think there's a high propensity to lean on, self-employment. But in terms of how YES could help, I hear, from a job preparation, is there like building those communities, obviously giving them a sense of worth, as well as helping them sort of maybe identify small economies or things that they could get involved with? What do you see there that YES could do, or that through a collaborative effort we could assist with in sort of helping them get more self-sustaining? And then also, just out of interest, what is the absorption rate of those that you train sort of into some of these programs?
Sure. So, it's interesting because I've actually just seen some of our data from a study we've just done now that's showing that between our alumni and our current YES youth, around 29% of them either have a side hustle or have started their own business. So to your point exactly is that we have a hugely entrepreneurial spirit in South Africa. As part of our program, we have digital work readiness training that is delivered on cell phones to all of our youth. That includes entrepreneurial modules. And if our youth complete these entrepreneurial modules within the program, they can then be eligible to apply for startup funding through the NYDA. So the National Youth Development Agency of South Africa. Similarly, now we're actually really working with a lot of our clients to try and see whether we can place these young people in SMMEs that form part of the client's value chain. So for example, Nestle, their youth work in small dairies, and this obviously assists the corporate because it's part of their value chain. It assists the SMMEs because they're then able to actually have a bigger workforce, which means that they become more profitable and they're able to hire more young people, and the youth get the 12-month work experience and hopefully then get absorbed. Our latest statistics are showing that around 46% of our youth are getting permanent employment within 1 month of completion of the program.
Amazing, great stat.
And I think, Renee, just another, I think to your point as well, is that the knock-on effect of this salary, 88% of our youth come from grant recipient households. So that salary is just an immediate ripple effect on communities, on families. And we can see that while these youth are working in their programs, they're also starting a beauty salon, helping their peers in coding. So I just think we really are a resilient nation. And if you give youth a chance, you can see the most amazing things.
Amazing. Very inspirational. Thank you so much, Leanne. So welcome, Imran, and sorry we didn't get your profile up at the beginning, but you are very much part of this panel and really bring the corporate experience that you have into the discussion. So with that, I'm going to jump right in to ask you, with your corporate experience and your involvement in Harambee, which is an organization that I read solving youth unemployment through partnership. Are you able to quantify the size of the challenge facing the South African economy in the next 5 years?
Yeah, and thank you, Renee, for mentioning my Harambee involvement. I really just want to firstly echo what Leanne said at the end. In the last few months, I've been engaging Harambee in particular, and what impresses me, which is counter to what one sees in the public domain, is that the hunger and the energy of South African youth is really unmatched. It is highly addictive, and it is, I guess, exciting to see South African youth want to improve the state of their lives and the state of the South African economy and the knock-on effect on the country. I think, and both Leanne and Andrew have touched on it. The numbers tell us that a third of youth entering the economy will find employment or will be in some sort of training program, which means 2/3 are unemployed. The actual stats at the moment, I'm told, are around 1 million individuals, 1 million youth entering the economy per annum. And if you project that over the next 5 years, it's approximately 6 million. So 2 million of those 6 will find either employment or will be in some sort of formal training program. So you have 4 million will be unemployed, of which only 75% are actively seeking to become involved. So for starters, there's 25% who are sitting on their hands doing nothing. And one has to then question what happens to those individuals and their involvement in areas which are unacceptable. But then the 75% that are actively seeking jobs are doing so in an economic environment that's not growing. So that's the size of the problem. We need to find job opportunities for 4 million individuals in the next 5 years.
And it's quite interesting because so I'm involved in bringing in foreign investment into Africa and South Africa, and some of the companies I mentioned earlier who are coming in to set up to sort of take advantage of some of the more educated talent. But it's like companies are wanting to come in and set up here, utilize our talent, but there's a huge, as you mentioned, youth unemployment, which how do we sort of, move that forward into utilizing these opportunities to take advantage of the energy they have to become employed? And I mean, maybe a lot of it is also systemic problems. One of the things that I was chatting to someone about recently is the fact that I think it was also 1/3 seems to be the theme of the day today, but 1/3 of youth grow up with no father figure, which, if you think about that, I mean, I think all of us, well, certainly I was, I had mentors in my life. And if you're not being given those opportunities to be mentored appropriately through life to follow a certain path, then, the stat of those 75% who will do nothing, it's a real systemic problem that we need to sort of dig a little deeper in. But again, I'm not sure how we change it. But again, it's the inspirational discussion of the pain points and perhaps how with government and private sector and business, we could possibly have more conversations to move the agenda forward. And on that note, I guess, what, in your viewpoint, could you see that business and government could do in collaboration to stimulate job creation in South Africa, and also, maybe even look at policy changes or system changes where we can give youth a bigger voice on policy, unlocking microeconomies and potential growth?
Yeah, and I think you've hit the nail on the head now. There's a lot of talk, or there's been a lot of talk around the supply side, so we know what the size of the problem is. How do we create the demand that matches that supply, I guess? And I'm particularly enthused about the fact that we do have an economy that is growing, unfortunately growing at the moment and not creating jobs. Because the growth is coming from efficiencies, particularly on the manufacturing and the procurement side. And therein, I think, lies perhaps our low-hanging fruits. We're an economy driven by a large manufacturing and agricultural sector. Unfortunately, because of the positive effects of globalization, local South African manufacturers has over the course of the last decade accelerated their global procurement programs. So as an example, one of South Africa's largest food producers outsources or imports 65 to 70% of its raw materials from other countries in the world. Now, these are raw materials that could be farmed, produced, processed, and manufactured in South Africa. So you think of the effect of exporting those particular items, and what comes to mind is tomato paste. Tomato paste finds its way into baked beans, into canned pilchards, into a number of items which are staple consumption products for South Africans. And it's almost criminal to my mind that we should be importing tomato paste. We should be producing tomato paste here because we've got the arable land, we've got the capability. And so that's one example where the incentive exists because of the short-term nature of business, that we want to be as efficient as we can and produce the best results we can in the shortest possible time frame. And so the individuals who are making the decisions on where to procure tomato paste, again, as an example, are incentivized with the wrong incentives. They're incentivized by a price point as opposed to a sustainability KPI. Leanne spoke about the BE scorecard as an example, and the BE scorecard over the last years has been exceptionally successful in implementing training programs. What we now have is potentially this bloated training infrastructure. There's a lot of money being spent on training programs, but as a corporate, I'm incentivized or I'm measured on the number of individuals I train. I'm not incentivized on the number of jobs I place out of those individuals I've trained. So the incentive mechanisms are. So I think that's where, for me, the collaboration needs to come. On one hand, the incentives need to change. A lot of what we're talking about are solutions that will be put in place now, where we'll only see the reward in 5, perhaps 10, perhaps 2 years' time. So, you're stuck in this conundrum where individuals, corporates who are, those who are listed have investors who want and expect returns now, as opposed to thinking about the longer term. So there needs to be a lot of conversation around an investment in infrastructure, an investment in localization, which will result in a growing economy, which then benefits everybody in the longer term. And I think the agricultural sector is one that requires a lot of attention because, as I said earlier, I'm particularly excited about what that could offer. Very simply, and I know you've got time allocated, the South African formal economy is around 80 to 85% of the jobs in the country at the moment. Most of these individuals we're talking about, the 4 million odd, don't have access to the formal economy. They've got access to, like Leanne says, the side hustles. And so those side hustles are in the informal sector where the development and encouragement of SMMEs needs to happen. So business can play a significant role in that regard. I'd love to see a shift of incentive for business away from training towards the establishment of and support of SMMEs. And it's not just the financial support upfront. It's about saying to a local farmer, if you produce the tonnage of tomato paste I require, I will guarantee you offtake for the next 5 years at a particular price. So it's that kind of support for the SMMEs where the bigger corporates who are procuring and importing product, whatever the product may be, from chilies to tomato paste, or even chicken and beef are imported into this country, which again makes me question what we're actually doing about agriculture in the country. But those incentives could be driven both by government and by corporates to ensure that we create jobs, particularly in the informal sector, which will then have a knock-on effect, particularly on these 4 million individuals who are available and don't need a significant amount of training to participate in those particular segments.
Actually, and just thinking about, a couple of things, I think, unfortunately, a little bit like the educational model is not necessarily sort of appropriate for, what we need, the youth to have get into the job market. But also from a corporate perspective, we're sort of very targeted around ticking boxes and not necessarily doing what is right for the economy and for, changing those mechanisms. I feel a certain sense of sort of enthusiasm around the Sustainable Development Goals, because I think if they're applied appropriately and properly within businesses, and we start really doing the right thing through the social, uplifting our social elements. I think, those metrics could start driving, this kind of conversation more aggressively. But I do love that. Thank you so much, Imran. I'm going to move on to Imtiaz if he wants to put his camera on. Welcome, Imtiaz.
Hello, Renee. Hello, everybody else.
Lovely to see you. And Imtiaz, I know you've done some incredible work around the world in times of crisis. I feel like, as we mentioned in the beginning, South Africa is in a bit of a crisis at the moment. And as mentioned earlier, the youth we have in South Africa are full of energy. They're the future of our country. But how does one really convert this into something valuable? The education system seems to be failing us. What skills could we trigger that don't maybe need a matric, or how could we leverage some of those opportunities?
There's a lot of things to look at, for youth in terms, first of all, we got to re-look at our education system. When I say that, I mean the university system. Children go, their fathers, their mothers bond their houses, they pay huge amounts of money, they go to university, and after they do an honors, they realize there's no job. Then they do the master's, then they do the PhD, and they come out very disillusioned, very angry, very depressed. They can't find a job. The first process we've got to look at is, what does the country need? I've spoken out quite openly and asking universities to shut down those departments that serve no purpose. We need to be on a war footing, and we need to train people in jobs that are required. And that takes the youth. So I'll come back to that part. The second part is, in training the youth in a formal school system, we want to build more schools. We want to put more classrooms, but we're not putting more teachers. In the COVID itself, we lost more than 2,000 teachers. This is ready jobs. There's 2,000 people who can immediately get a job, will provide a tax base, will bring more taxes, will come to the treasury or to SARS. And at the same time, we'll have more teaching and more education of the children. That's one level of teaching. The second level of teaching, my wife is a counseling psychologist. She recently, as part of internship, went to a school in my hometown, place called Pietermaritzburg. And when she went to the school, she came back that afternoon horrified. She said there's 40 children in a class, but there's 173 children who are learning disorders in the school. So how does a teacher cope with a class of 40 kids plus 173 kids within those different classes with learning disorders? Added to that, the social challenges, broken homes, no father, drinking problems, no food, hunger, all those kind of issues. What kind of a stable child will come out and to support, and be stable in the economy? So we have a second option here. We can train large numbers of teachers in special education needs, which then again is job creating, and of course, teaching kids to find some kind of future, because they then would have the skill. In the afternoon, waiting for their taxi or their bus, they go home 4 o'clock. Between 2 and 4, every day, if we upskill those children with special needs teachers, because a lot of parents, let's be honest, don't have the time or don't understand the education system currently. I mean, I find it difficult. I've got a 6-year-old and I don't understand the kind of things she's doing now that I did in my time. It's all changed. It's very, very different. So how do we expect people who haven't studied to really help their own kids? That's the second phase. So teaching is a ready job, both teaching and Elson teachers. The next phase, people say they'll only invest in our country if it's secure. We say health, everybody says health and education is number one. But if I tell you, Greece is a fantastic country. They've got a fantastic health system. They've got a very great education system. But crime is a big problem there. You can get shot in the street, you can get robbed, you can get harmed. People say, I'm not going there. So in the same in South Africa, if you want tourists to come, which in itself is a huge market that can absorb a lot of children, a lot of young people, and give us the skills that we're talking about, just to say, I did something. I got some experience. I was a waiter. So car guards have become doctors in this country. Car guards have gone to become really experienced in business, because it's about opportunity. It showed they had the tenacity, they had the resilience to do something, not to throw the towel in, and to work hard. So, I mean, it's quite an extreme example from a car guard to a doctor, but it means anything can be done, And of course, waiters and in the hospitality industry, the hotel I stay in normally in Cape Town, during COVID itself, we started giving out support to the staff in the hotel, although they were being paid because the money was cut. So I asked them, how many people in the hotel? And they said 18. They said normally in the reception alone, there's 33. The entire hotel had 18 staff. So if the tourists come back, how many more jobs are going to be created? How many more families are going to be supported? So then it comes to the point security. So when I say let's support, jobs which are of social interest, teachers of social interest, policemen, when they're putting 12,000 policemen, it's a job, but it's part of security. It's part of upgrading the country. People start feeling more secure, more supported, and more safe. And the corporates start investing, and people start investing. There's trillions of rands lying parked off in South Africa, which nobody's using. They say they can't invest because the country is not secure. It works the other way around. If you invest, the country will become secure. It works both ways. So that's another option we can look at. The third option, which is staring us in our face, is the health sector. We have a huge shortage of healthcare personnel, meaning doctors, nurses, OT, audiologists, dentists, physiotherapists, dietitians. And of course, the big one in the last 3 years is psychologists. So let's go back to the psychologists. The universities train 21 psychologists per department per year, 7 educational, 7 counseling, 7 clinical. We've had a monster of a crisis in mental health since COVID, since unrest, since unemployment, job losses, and debt. The amount of psychologists we have can never deal with the challenges of 65 million people. This is a ready avenue. Universities need to rechange structure. There's the syllabus and the thinking, and we can produce psychologists who will have ready jobs. Doctors will have ready jobs. Of course, the state can pay. And and then of course, right now as I talk to you, there's availability of 895 posts for paramedics. No takers. And that's only in the public sector, not in the private sector. I met an ambulance service 2 days ago in Johannesburg. They can take 100 paramedics a year. So the jobs are, the opportunities are there. We just need to do the training in those fields. Then let's expand a little bit what Imran was talking about. You see, our corporates killed our jobs in South Africa. We started importing textiles from China. We killed cotton farming. We killed the jobs of tens of thousands of people because we started importing cheap textiles. To the credit of the corporates, Woolworths, TFG, Mr. Price, and there was one more, Truett's. They're now looking at local procurement. What that local procurement means, we now can support cotton farming. Farmers need to diversify. We can't look at maize only. The olive crops this year was huge. Yes, we're still importing, but we're importing less. We can develop more crops where we can export olives. There's macadamia nuts you can put in where sheep farmers are. Why focus only on sheep farming? Drought, all the sheep died. So we have to look at the different things. Textiles is one. Farming in all the different, I'm not a farmer, but people in different farming fields know how they can diversify. Thirdly, a hometown that I mentioned, Pietermaritzburg, used to be a huge leather industry town. Hundreds of thousands of jobs created by the leather industry. We just need to bring it back. We need to support the idea. It's ethical to support local business, support your own kind, your own country, your own people. Yes, it may cost a little more, but you're putting food on the table of hundreds of thousands of people, which then spend in an economy, which then circulates, which makes everybody grow. The other last one is construction industry. We need not to build new hospitals, not new schools. We need to upgrade existing schools, existing hospitals, but build houses. You can put in a lot of people in the construction industry and give them those skills. They can be given the skills on site. They can be taken from school. They may not have to have a matric. Somebody asked about that earlier. They can be treated on site and guided and directed on site. It's not complicated. A lot of kids have internal talent. At the age of 4 and 5, they're building these wooden carts and they're making things, with wire. Kids, a lot of them have innate talent, which can then be harnessed in, this kind of factor. And the last point is, we should ask all South African companies, you take formal qualified people. Why not take one youth that came out from university and give them an apprenticeship? Because what Leanne said earlier, if you don't have experience, you can't get a job. But you can't get a job if you don't have experience. It works both ways. So if every corporate takes in 1 or 2%, gives them a stipend, some kind of skill, it's not about the money. It's about dignity, self-esteem, positive self-image. All those contribute to a very prosperous country. I was with Daimler, they know about Mercedes-Benz now, the Daimler trucks. and with the CEO a few weeks ago. And he said, we as a German company take kids from school or university and we bring them in our workshops and we upskill them, we train them, and we give them jobs. If a German company can do that in South Africa, why can't South African companies do that in South Africa?
It's a really, really good point. Actually, I think it's called, I don't know the name, it's called Arbutz something, it's a German name. They actually do that as a technical training throughout Germany. So it's such a great philosophy. But the other thing I wanted to bring up is, you know, we have quite a good example with Busa, where they pivoted manufacturing when we were manufacturing sort of hand cream to now manufacture sanitizer during the COVID crisis and masks and everything instead of importing. So, you know, I think there's definitely sort of the heart to be able to encourage our economy to grow and pivot to be able to, you know, have it more homegrown. But it's just putting these mechanisms, I guess, in place. Thank you so much, Imtiaz. I think one of my other, I'll actually keep this one maybe quite short, just so we can move on to a group discussion and answer some of the questions. Grants, I guess, and philanthropy, you know, I guess are really helpful in terms of what they offer. But how do we create more of a self-sustaining environment for the youth? I mean, are we perhaps looking at the West for examples to amplify here in South Africa, rather than perhaps looking at India and Africa? I'll just give you one quick example, and maybe you can just answer. Is someone was telling me about in Kenya, I think it was, they're producing coders from school leavers because they've got such a shortage of coders in the country for the business that requires these coders. And in India, they have decided that not everyone will have a device. And so now they've gone away from device technology and moved on to biometric technology, which I thought was quite interesting.
Look, we need to understand that, I'm sorry, I'm blunt. This is not India, neither is the West. You know, South Africa has its own type of requirements. Quite often we get calls from India or from America or Europe and say, we want it done this way. And we tell them it's not your country. It doesn't work that way. You know, things work differently. There's a different mindset here. People have different interests. We can learn from other countries up north and on the south. You know, we can learn from them. But we have to find solutions typical to our own situation. And, you know, corporates know that, youths know that. It's all about creating opportunities. And to me, right now, if you look at the youth in South Africa, they're all looking upwards at fellow youth from their own color that have made progress from university, because unfortunately, the materialism bug gets the young student the moment it's the corporate companies are very responsible for this. The guy hasn't even qualified yet. He hasn't got his certificate yet. And the corporate companies will be waiting on the dinner table and said, you can get this vehicle, you know, if you don't have to pay for the next 3 months, and this is what it will cost you. And what happens? The guy loses his job, you know, and suddenly there's no money to pay for interns or junior interns, and they put more backwards. So they're encouraged by the material aspect of living. But I'm saying that there's an extreme that people see other children, kids see other children make progress, and they want to emulate that example and live like that. But at the same time, there are a lot of children who are very realistic, who live by ethical value, who come from the townships, who said, our parents have worked very hard. We'll start off with simple things. We'll do waste recycling. It's a humble job. We'll collect the bottles. We'll collect the plastic. We'll collect the cans. We'll do something simple. And there was a guy outside Home Affairs. In South Africa, people wait for hours in the queue. He brought a stack of chairs, put it outside Home Affairs and said, you pay me like a 1 rand to sit on the chair for so many hours. He was innovative. Like that, there are a lot of South Africans who come up with a lot of innovative ideas. And those innovative ideas can only come specific to our country.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Sharon, I'm sure we've got questions from the audience, and I'm sure you have some questions. Should we open up everyone's cameras and ask those questions?
Thanks very much. I must admit, I spent this morning before this meeting with the UK High Commissioner and some very eminent South Africans here in the UK from South Africa that were in a briefing circle talking about the issues, but they didn't talk about the youth and the education in any degree of depth to what we've heard now. And we were talking about at the end of that conversation is how do we bring hope? I would love to just take this recording and share it with that group, because it does give me hope, because it is a big problem. Interesting, I go back to my own history. I ran a company in Johannesburg, and I worked on the theory as I had no money. I couldn't afford the skills I needed, but I needed people to help me, and there was no ways I could do it alone. I must have educated over 100 people. Other than the first 3, I think, not one of them had matric. They would start with a menial job in the company, and they'd end up being the accountant, the dealer, the forex person, the auditor, the accounts, you name it. They picked up all those jobs. And those people are still employed in banking and in various other roles and have catered for massive numbers of family. So I feel very encouraged when I hear that the talk is not only about the education system, it's about SMMEs, because that's what I was. It's about people helping each other. It's about the private sector. It's not asking for government to find the solution. I get some of your points where government needs to change things because they're wasting money or time or effort or focus. So my question comes to the point, taking my example, maybe if we could all sort of have we don't have a lot, we only have 7 minutes left, and I mustn't talk anymore, is we need to create the ability for the youth to have the skills for the gaps that are there, which is something you've all covered in an element or another. Then I assume there's some barriers. What are the things people like, for example, the Chamber, for example, another SME in the UK, another big corporate in the UK, somebody who's investing into the country, somebody who's already in the country. What are the types of sort of practical solutions they can do tomorrow to make a difference? I could open it up to everyone. Maybe Andrew, you start. You spoke last, the furthest away, so maybe you would like to start, and then I'll leave it to see if anyone just wants to sort of put a hand up, or put a electronic hand up, and we can see if we can get all of you before the end of the session.
Well, I think the point about partnerships between South African businesses and international businesses, with links into global value chains, the role that a British company can play in collaboration with South African companies is so much greater than if it tries to operate as an island. And is not in partnership with other businesses, with the NGOs who are doing the kinds of training and identification of young people that we've talked about, and especially in the areas that Imtiaz was talking about. And I think that his sort of summary of the kinds of diversification of the economy, the agro-processing opportunities that Imran talked about as well, opportunities in housing. I mean, these are all areas that are quite employment intensive, that can quite easily expand numbers of opportunities for young people, the services sector, restaurants, tourism related activities, security services, the police, etc., etc. All of these are areas of potential employment, but they often require quite hard work to go into finding what works locally. And Imtiaz made the point is that, you can't simply import a model from elsewhere in the world. Our townships, our housing challenges, our tourism industry, our security issues are different from elsewhere. And you have to work with local organizations and local municipalities, local authorities, etc. Putting in that little bit of extra work to collaborate with local organizations and local businesses is what it really pays off, and it certainly is part of finding something practical to do. Don't try to find all the answers yourself.
Anybody else like to go second? Leanne, your things off, then maybe we go Imtiaz, then Imran.
I feel like I might be taking a bit of advantage here, but call me, please. So, we're doing some wonderful projects with international companies where, like Pizza Hut, for example, they're doing a leadership program that's tied into their sustainable development goals, where we're training 100 young women and putting them in 12-month work opportunities in education, healthcare, creative, digital skills. And we would love to work with organizations that are like-minded. We've also got a tech companies that's doing a project with us for their equity equivalent investment program. So we would love to speak to you further look at ways to collaborate. Thanks.
No, I appreciate it. Thanks very much. Imtiaz, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm very much with you.
Yeah, good. Your view on sort of the informal opportunity of matching training rather than education, training for skills for the gaps that exist.
Well, I want to speak about something slightly different that I need to bring that discussion into, for a minute.
Yeah, we only have three.
Yeah, I only need one.
Good.
People are saying the government's got no money. I just want to give you three examples. One is we're speaking to corporates to fund registrars in training. The government has cut posts of registrars in training, which means there's no academic medicine, there's no consultants, there's no teaching for junior interns, for medical officers, and for interns, because there's no money. So we're telling the corporates, we need 300 corporates, 1.2 million rand a year, which is nothing. We will then train over 4 years, let's say with inflation, 1.5 billion. We will train 300 registrars. We will then keep them within the public healthcare system, which will bring a radical improvement in health in South Africa. It's job creation, it's teaching, it's academics. Number two, the same thing. One corporate can pay for the teacher training. The second one can pay the salary for the teacher training for the next 3 years. The last 2 points is the diving unit in SAPS is crying. They said nobody's coming to take over to learn what our skills. We're going away. We need people. We need people to fund our diving units. I said, I'll fund the courses. People can go 15,000 rand for one diver, but learns all the skills to come back in the police service. And finally, they got no dogs. For search and rescue, for training, we're funding 60 dogs to give dog handlers the chance to go forward and, of course, save the country in terms of disaster. Those are just some examples of things you can do in the country from corporate support.
Thank you. That is magic. Imran, from the corporate sector and your other experiences, would you like to give us our final comments?
Yeah, I like to be pragmatic about these things. So for me, I think incoming companies, foreign investors need to be very deliberate about engaging the SMEs. Whether it's directly or indirectly. Typically, I've dealt with a lot of tech startups in the last few months. They come into the country, they employ the best lawyers, the big name firms. But had they been a little bit more deliberate about saying, we're going to employ you, big name firm, but we want to ensure that you've got 2 or 3 SME law firms, lack of a better term, but the smaller developing law firms on your books, that's a very deliberate intervention. Amazon's constructing its offices here in Saltoro Park. I would love to have seen them involved, the construction company that they employed, make a very deliberate attempt to bring in construction SMEs into that construction. So for me, be very practical about engaging the SMEs and force the bigger companies that you procure with to encourage SME participation.
Thank you so much. Dead on time. I really appreciate it. One of the comments that has been made in one of the questions, there are a couple of questions we haven't been able to get to, but the point made, and I think Imran came out of your stats, is that there's that element that are not even trying to get a job, that are living off the grant system or whatever, or family, or crime, or corruption, or gangs, and all the other horrible things that do occur. Let's hope that through the efforts of people like those on the panel and those in everyday jobs that are really working hard, are also going to encourage that percentage to come down, and that we're going to employ our youth. I'd like to thank everybody. It's been a fascinating discussion. I've really found it very inspiring, and the opportunity for South Africa to start growing itself out of solution, not its population, but its food, I think is a wonderful opportunity. We talked about that when I was a kid at school, and that was a long, long time ago. So it would be lovely to see that happen, where we don't import, we create, manufacture, and consume. So here's to South Africa and finding the route through and the logic through it, but now we need to all between us deliver. So I'd like to thank the panel, one and all. I really appreciate time, and for everyone else who has stayed on with us for the last 2 minutes beyond our time, I really do appreciate it. Thanks a lot. And to our panel, really appreciate what you've done.
Thank
Very
you. Good to be with you.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Imtiaz, Imran.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks all.
Renee, Magic.
Thanks. Bye.